We didn't grow up knowing what executive function skills were. Life felt overwhelming. Managing time, staying organized, and feeling stuck made everything difficult. What we didn't realize was that we lacked the skills to plan, prioritize, and break goals into manageable steps. After years of trial and error, we've seen how powerful executive function skills can be. With expert interviews, real stories, and practical strategies, this podcast is the resource we wish we had. Whether you're a student, parent, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential. Danielle, I can't tell you how nice it is to talk to you today, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me, Brandon.
Yeah, so I wanted to pick your brain because we know there's a high correlation between executive function challenges and anxiety. So what's going on here?
Well, a lot of things. So executive function challenges create conditions that trigger anxiety, and anxiety further undermines executive function challenges. So it's kind of a two-way street, and they reinforce each other unless you interrupt the loop. And I talk to my clients a lot about interrupting loop.
A lot of parents are listening to this podcast. And so let's talk about first, how do they help them interrupt the loop with their child? So let's say their child is late to school every day and it's causing a lot of anxiety in the family. How do we interrupt that loop there?
Well, I mean, there's several ways. The first thing that I do when a family comes to see me is sort of raise awareness about what's happening in that moment. So I do a lot of work with parents on what I call co-regulation. So it's critical that the parents are able to regulate their own feelings of distress in that moment so that they can help the child regulate their feelings of distress in the moment. So that's sort of one thing. And then I work with families on having sort of a common language of what to do in those moments. So if everyone's starting to get frantic, someone can't find their sock, someone can't find their backpack, we're all moving into this like escalated brain state, and everyone needs to take it a few steps down. So I call it green brain, yellow brain, red brain. I have a whole training that I do with families that I've done for many, many years. And we need to catch ourselves when we're moving into our yellow brain. And I have kids saying, "Mom, you're in your yellow brain," and parents saying, "Oh, honey, it looks like you're moving into your yellow brain." And then I work with families to create, I call it a self-regulation menu. So they have a whole menu of skills and tools that they can use in that moment to help calm their systems down, self-regulate, and then move on with their tasks.
I love the idea of having that common language because I know when I'm escalating, when we're running late, like I go from green to red like so fast. And so having that common language, because often I'd imagine it's hard to catch that within yourself.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And also not being defensive when your child suggests that you're ramping up, right?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes. And that's why I usually do it with the whole family. So it's a contract, and we're all saying to each other in this room, in this office room, saying we're willing to try working on this. It's going to be hard. Sometimes I'm going to feel defensive and irritable, but it's worth it. So we kind of have to contract around those things. Yes, it's going to be irritating. I always say we're going to throw everything at it and see what sticks. And we're going to make mistakes. A lot of things aren't going to stick, but we're going to keep trying. And ultimately, it's going to be better for everybody. I try to give families like the long view, like, trust me, like when this kiddo's in college or a young adult, these are skills that are really going to help them be successful.
Oh, 100%. And so if someone wasn't in your office, how would you recommend they go about developing this common language? Is it just having an authentic conversation in the kitchen, or what does that look like?
Well, so the first thing to do is think about what it is that causes, that quick ramp up from green to red and slowing that down. So the first thing I would say is helping teach your kids the physiological response of worry. So some people feel nauseous, some people's hearts beat really fast, some people get flushed. There's all different kinds of things that happen within our body when we start getting anxious. And if we know those cues, we can slow them down. So the very first thing is just awareness. Like, what happens to us individually when we start ramping up. And if we can catch it right before, maybe it's in yellow, it's not quite red, it's a lot easier to slow it down. Because once we're in red brain, it's all over. That's when it's much harder to come back down to green. It's already, you're sort of in a like shame spiral, you're upset. So we want to teach people how to de-escalate before it gets too high up there.
And thank you for slowing me down, because that's exactly what we're doing, right? I think a lot of people want the tips and tactics, and it's really just that self-awareness of when we're starting to ramp up. And talk about a gift you can give your kids for a long time is that simple understanding seems like it's such a big deal in all areas of emotional regulation.
Yeah, 100%. And then once you know what it feels like in your body when you start getting worried or anxious, then we come up with this menu that I call it. And everyone goes home with a menu, but you can do this at home. You sit down around dinner or whatever, popcorn, and you talk about what feels good when you feel worried. And everybody has a different list. And it's super individualized. It can be, mindfulness, breathing. It can be cold water. I had clients that say, like, it really helps me when I do 5 jumping jacks or 5 push-ups. It can be listening to music, watching a YouTube video, although that's a slippery slope. There's all different things. And I try to create a long, long list so that the minute they're feeling that ramp up, the minute they're feeling that physiological escalation of their bodies, they can refer to their menu and say, okay, I'm going to try this. That didn't work so well. I'm going to move on to the next one. And then once everybody's calm, they can rationally move forward with finding their sock or not, or like, hey, it's okay. Let's just.
Yeah, I love the idea of a self-regulation menu, because it builds this metacognition.
Yeah.
How does this look in the real world? And I'm going to use the same example of running late to school, just because I hear that all the time. How does this look in the real world? You have your challenging morning. We know we got to get to school by 8 a.m. How does that look with your clients?
So success begets success. I tell my clients this all the time. And once you practice these things, it sounds a little daunting at first, but it really becomes second nature. And it really becomes part of like the culture of your family, so that you can say in that moment, I'm almost in yellow brain. We have to be out in 10 minutes. I'm going to go drink a glass of cold water to get myself back into green brain, and we're out the door. You do you. I'm going to do this thing, and then we're going to leave. And it just becomes more almost habitual that you feel it, you do it, you go.
Yeah. And also when there's pushback from families that there's no time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you and I would both argue that getting that drink of water, taking those 3 deep breaths or whatever that is, that's going to probably save you a lot more time than running around frantically.
I would say time and less of an emotional impact. So, nothing feels worse than dropping your kids off at school after a fight. You feel crappy, your kid feels crappy. You wish you had done things better. Your kid's left with feeling, worrying that you're mad at them. So if we can circumvent that, even if it takes a couple extra minutes, I agree. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even think about the emotional toll and the lack of learning at school because you're in your head because mom or dad just went off or your caregiver just went off on you. So yeah, that's a really good point. Talking about procrastination. So there's been a lot of research coming out recently that procrastination is actually more emotional than behavioral. And I know this is a hot debate right now, but how do you think about procrastination?
Ooh, this is a really, really good question. I guess I want to say very explicitly that procrastination is not laziness. And I feel like I hear this all the time. I can't even tell you how many school meetings, family sessions, etc. I've been in where a student is called lazy. I don't like it. They're not the same thing. And kids, again, internalize those messages that they're bad, they can't learn, they're lazy, it affects their self-esteem and confidence. When in actuality, procrastination it's a form of like emotional self-protection. And it's really the result of a task feeling like way too big, way too daunting, way too high stakes. Your brain is interpreting it as a threat. And this triggers anxiety, worry, self-doubt, frustration. And so what do? We avoid. And avoiding the task gives us some temporary relief, which rewards the brain for procrastinating. And the more this happens, the more of a habit it becomes. So it's less about like willpower and more about your brain just trying to avoid emotional pain in the short term, even if it has long-term consequences.
Yeah, just feel good in the immediate, right? When someone gets really stuck on procrastination, or you see a student which they just called lazy, how do you help that student, first of all, not internalize that, but second of all, what is the next right step to help that child beat this procrastination monster, or at least improve?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be sort of attacked in many different areas. I think that there are some pragmatic skills that need to be learned, and that's less my department. It's probably more your department, Brandon. So, things like breaking things down into small pieces, helping with organization, that kind of thing, when things feel too overwhelming. There's also just a lot of emotional baggage with procrastination and feelings of shame and blame and anger and frustration. It can cause a lot of conflict in a family and within a student's own sense of self. So, sort of helping them tease that stuff out. Like, what's really going on for you? What does it feel like when you're, approaching this task and you're just feeling so crappy that you don't even want to start? And then you have 2 assignments, and then you have 3 assignments, and you're already challenged with executive function skills. It starts feeling so huge. You're sort of crushed under the weight of all that you have to do. So kind of figuring out what they're avoiding in that behavior, and then how to help them structure their response.
Definitely. And a lot of it, like you said, breaking it down to the smallest step. 2 pats in the back, 1 kick in the tail, a lot of love, a lot of accountability. We throw in body doubling, a lot of the stuff that people know.
Yeah.
But, I think where your response is powerful is that it's not a laziness. It's not a character issue. People confuse these executive function skills and character, and they're just not the same things. And they're skills that can be built.
Yes. And I always encourage families to give a ton of praise. A ton. And a lot of these students get negative reinforcement all over the place. School, sports teams, home. They're often told what they're not doing well. And it feels good to be praised. And so I tell families, like, encourage them for starting, encourage them for trying. They might not finish, but that's not the goal right now. The goal is jumping in. Like, hey, I'm so proud of you for going to meet with Danielle. That's amazing. Or I'm so proud of you for trying this new skill. Right on. It might work, it might not, but I'm really, really proud of you. Awesome job there. That kind of thing. I feel like those things might seem kind of, obvious in some ways, but they're a really, really powerful motivational. They help motivate the kids.
And I think they feel obvious now when we're not in it. But I think to a lot of families, like, my student's failing math. They have 10 missing math assignments.
Yeah.
He started an assignment and I was supposed to praise him or her for doing that. And it just doesn't feel right. But I know you and I would argue, like, math class is math class. We're building skills for long term.
Yes.
And if we want the best successful outcomes long term and not to have this relationship damaged, well, this is where we have to start.
Yeah. I think what I would say to that parent is, what's the intent? What's the intent of the negative messaging? And often they'll say, like, I want to motivate them. I'm worried about them. I want them to succeed. I get it. I get all that. Of course you do. Of course you do. This is your child. So right now that strategy is not working very well. I understand the intent. The impact is that they're doing even less, they're failing more, etc. So if we're taking the goal of success, we're taking the goal, a successful future or whatever it is, let's figure out a different strategy and try it. Let's try praise. Let's try some of these new EF skills that might be kind of annoying, but might work. Let's try some improved self-regulation skills. Or I also do a lot of, like, distress tolerance skill training. So just like you're going to have a negative feeling. You have to learn how to deal with the negative feeling, you know?
Yeah, no, I've been in this situation more times than I can count where we're like, we have to try something different. And it really does come from love from the parent. It doesn't seem like it because there's this negative reinforcement, but it's really deep down coming from love.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard for the kid definitely doesn't understand it. We're damaging the relationship long term, but they just care so much. And I would argue, and I still do argue, that the world's going to change a lot in the next 10, 15 years. What's going to be really relevant is that they know how to deal with these big emotions, like what you're talking about. And I think that's a much more important skill than math homework. Now it's just done through the lens of math homework, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think it's really critical for the parents to know their own triggers and know where this stuff is coming from. So often I hear parents saying, but that's how I was parented. I'm going to make them, they're going to be too soft. They're never going to make it out there. The world's a hard place. I hear these things. And that's a great conversation to have with parents. That's important insight. That may have worked for you and you're a successful human. That isn't working for your child. Your child's really different. Your child has different needs and a very different brain. And I think we need to think about like alternative ways of helping them.
Yeah. Well, and one of the roots of unhappiness I see a lot in parents, and by the way, I'm no different, right?
Yeah.
I love getting advice on it. I'm terrible in the moment. But one of the roots of unhappiness is I'm going to stick with the middle school child. We take our child and then we project where that child's going to be 10, 15, 20 years from now based on this middle school self, like they're not going to change, instead of meeting them where they are. Do you see that as well?
I do. And, I can sort of like put on my parenting hat now. I am the parent of 2 neurodiverse young adults. And I very much thought that I knew who they were going to be, and they are not. And I think it was like one of the hardest, one of my greatest challenges as a parent was really meeting my kids where they were at and realizing that, wow, I'm actually not the expert on them. Like they're the expert on themselves and they know what they need, especially as they get older. And my system might not work and actually might be causing harm. So it's also, I tell parents this all the time, like they surprise you all the time. Every time something is so annoying that you feel like you can't handle it, then you figure out a way to handle it, they're going to figure out something else, right? The kid's going to like come up with something else and like, oh, they just figured this out. So, they're just constantly evolving. It's important to understand them like developmentally and what's developmentally appropriate and what feels a bit amiss that we need help with.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
Like after all the work you and I've done, it's so hard to do that. And it feels like it's the path, right? I know the worst word you can say to me is should. Like this kid should be able to, they should this, they should that. They're in college, they should be able to play that. Well, they can't, right? So what do you want me to do here? I hear you saying that. It sounds like it's the same way with procrastination. It's like, well, they should be able to do this whole assignment, but they can't. So how do we want to go about this differently?
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. Sometimes sort of explaining the whys of procrastination can really help parents and families and the student. And I'm really big on goals. I love a good goal. And if the parent's goal is for them to be a successful, engaged student, whatever that means, I might break that down a little bit. Let's come up with steps to get there. And if there's a lot of those like shoulds, but they should, I will always loop back to the goal. Is what we're doing helping us with your child becoming an engaged student? Usually the answer is no, it's making them hate school.
I love that, zooming back out in those high stress times.
Yeah. And sometimes I have people put like a Post-it up on the refrigerator or a reminder on, a Post-it on their computer that our goal, like let's sit with this goal and create a system around this goal to help my child be successful and engaged.
After all the work you've done, what are the core set of goals that have worked, right? Because I can think about immediately parents who are like, well, I want my student to get into an Ivy League school, or I want to have this type of MBA or whatever. From my experience, that's typically not that helpful with our population. Do you have goals that you've seen tend to work better, like types of goals?
Yeah, I mean, an important part of goals like that is to recognize that that is not at all in our control. So we can do everything possible. We could throw every resource at a kid, and they might not and probably won't end up at one of those schools or getting an MBA. That is just simply not in our control. There's so many elements that go into admissions. So what I do in those cases is why? Why do you want your kid to go to an Ivy League school? What is that about for you? And I would say like 99% of the time, it's because they think that an education like that will provide success for their child. What does success look like? And success is often tied to happiness, right? And feeling content with your life. And so I like to sort of like whittle those goals down into like the bottom layer of it, which is usually a child's emotional well-being. That's what parents really, really want. That's what they want. And they can get that in many, many different ways. I always say, I promise as a parent, I promise as a clinician that's been doing this for a million years, there's so many ways to achieve happiness. And your unique child who has, incredible strength and some growth areas, we're going to figure out what that is, because ultimately it sounds like you want your kid to be happy.
That's such a good point. You and I live in areas of the country where we know a lot of people who have gone to Ivy League schools, and I don't know, I would say that's even near close to the top of people I know who are happy, like the correlation there, right? It's not the correlation to happiness like we think it is.
No. And is this a child who would thrive in that environment? Is this what a parent thinks is going to make somebody successful and happy? Or is this really being attuned to who the child is, and would they thrive in that environment?
Got it. One last question for you.
Yeah.
We've talked about procrastination and overwhelmed, and then procrastination, the link between anxiety. What are some of the subtle cues that either parents or teachers or whoever can look for to see what's going on if the student's procrastinating?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like anxiety-driven avoidance can look a whole lot like procrastination. It can look like disrespect, but the driver of the behavior, what's under the behavior, is anxiety. It's a fear of failure. It's uncertainty. It's worry, judgment, being judged. And unlike like laziness, I'm putting it in air quotes, which is sort of like a lack of motivation across the board, anxiety is usually really selective. So it's tied to a very specific trigger. And then there's some sort of like subtle emotional or physiological signs. And those, the physiological, or like what I would say somatic signs, would be like headaches, not feeling well, tummy ache, request to go to the nurse, to the bathroom, having trouble sleeping, or being chronically exhausted. We see a lot of kids sort of like zoning out and giving one-word answers, or I don't know, I forgot. That can be an anxiety response, not defiance. So I think it's really important to like tease out where the behavior is coming from and not make these like overarching assumptions that your kid is a particular way because of these behaviors.
Yeah. And for teachers, because there's a lot of teachers who listen as well.
Yeah.
So, you've alluded to a lot getting curious, right? So instead of assuming whatever, and this is hard when you have a classroom of kids, I get it, being a former teacher, but when you have that opportunity, just to get curious about it and see what's going on there. I think coming back to the positive reinforcement you said as well, I also think that's a really big part of students who feel safe in a classroom are much more likely to take that risk, even when it feels scary to put yourself out there.
Yeah. And I would say if there's lots and lots of big feelings in your home, in your classroom, and it feels difficult to manage, which it often does, get help. It also, help isn't permanent. Help can be just, I'm going to get help this much. And that can look lots of different ways. That can be hiring a professional. That can be, therapy, coaching. That could be getting a mentor. That could be, for you or the child, making sure you have lots of good self-care in your routine. So I would just encourage folks to really think about what they need in these really tough circumstances.
I love it. Danielle, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Good question. So I am in a group private practice in Berkeley, California, but I'm licensed in California. So if you're interested in checking out what we do, look at the show notes and feel free to email me anytime with questions. I have families doing that every single week. Just, hey, we're curious about this. What do you think about this? And I really welcome it. Again, as a parent, I want families to have resources.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Thanks for being such a great advocate.
Brandon, thank you. Thank you so much. It was really fun talking with you.
Thank you for joining us on the Executive Function for All podcast. If today's episode brought you any value, please rate us 5 stars and share it with someone who may benefit. And remember, every small step you take builds towards your success. For resources and guidance, visit untappedlearning.com. Keep growing, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.